This morning we're going to discuss what the Course in Miracles refers to as the rock on which salvation rests. There's a section called the rock of salvation. The rock on which salvation rests is the idea that nobody loses and everybody wins. In other words, it's the Course's answer to the ego's belief in sacrifice, which is a belief in one or the other. If I'm to achieve peace, someone else has to be vanquished. If I'm to demonstrate my innocence and sinlessness, somebody has to be proven to be sinful. It's always one or the other. And the origin of this thought, which really is the core of everyone's thought system, therefore it's the core of the world in which we live, is the belief right at the beginning that the separation from God actually occurred. And that is the ontological or the original one or the other. Either God's perfect oneness is the truth and the reality, or my specialness and individuality and separation is the reality. But they both cannot be true. They are mutually exclusive ideas. Oneness means there can be no separation. Separation means there can be no oneness. It's one or the other. Either God is the creator of who I am, or I am the creator of who I am. It's one or the other. And if I exist, as we all believe we do, then it means that God, who can be defined as this living and loving oneness, no longer exists. And since that's the core of the thought system that gave rise to the ego, it's the core of the thought system that made the world, and it's the core of the thought system that got fragmented, and each and every separated or seemingly separated fragment of the sonship contains within it this core ego belief of one or the other. But we all have right minds as well, and the right-minded thought system is based on the principle of together or not at all. So these are the two thoughts, or the two principles that basically typify everyone's wrong and right minds, one or the other, or together or not at all. And this gets us now back to the rock on which salvation rests. The only way we could be truly saved from our belief in the reality of separation and our belief in the reality and justification for our guilt is to recognize that the separation never happened, that we are all still part of God's living and loving oneness. And that principle of oneness is reflected here within the illusion, or within our dream of separation, that we are all the same. Therefore, if one loses, everyone loses. If one wins, we all win. And there can be no exceptions to this. Some time ago, I did a workshop here at the Foundation called The Two Words of Salvation. And the two words of salvation that I discussed in that workshop were without exception. We forgive all people without exception. We let God's love or Jesus' love extend through us without exception. And then we watch how we exclude. I'll love some people, but not all people. I'll love almost all people, but not everyone. I'll love everyone in my office. I'll respect everyone in my family, but not all. There will always be some that I will exclude. I'll respect these public figures, but not those public figures. Or I'll love this person today, but I don't know if I'll love that person tomorrow. There are always different ways in which we exclude, and we exclude because that reinforces our belief in the reality of the principle of one or the other. And if that principle is upheld, it means my individual, special, unique self is upheld as well. So we're literally always fighting for our survival. So the rock on which salvation rests, no one loses and everyone wins, is the end of the ego's rock, because the rock on which the ego's salvation rests is that my happiness and my peace, indeed my salvation, comes at someone else's expense. Again, it's one or the other. So if I'm truly serious about living this course and practicing its principles, then I must put into practice, I must put into application my awareness of how I seek to exclude. And by asking Jesus or the Holy Spirit for help means I look at that seeming sin, which is a reenactment of the original sin of believing I could separate from God, selfishly establishing my own reality at his expense, see how I live this out over and over again in my everyday life, and ask for help that I look at this without judgment, recognizing that this does not make me a sinner, it simply makes me afraid. And if I could look at that fear without judgment, I will let it go, and then what remains is what the Course calls the principle of atonement, that the separation from God never happened. And within that principle, I am now free to embrace all people without exception. And that's the rock on which salvation rests.